So, a bar chart, the labels down here, this is labels that are some sort of labels, like restaurants or things like that. But then if you get to the histogram, things are connected to each other. Okay? Now, each of these widths, the widths need to be equal, but on the x-axis down on the bottom, they are labeled with a range of things, so you're basically counting up. Now, the fortunate thing is Desmos, and I think tomorrow's we show you how to make a histogram on Desmos. Desmos does a really nice job. Now, the difficult thing, when you do something on Desmos, and then I say, okay, show this on your work, you kind of have to try and plagiarize what Desmos has the best you can to try and get it labeled. But things about a histogram, it is titled. The x-axis, in this case, is labeled with numbers, not quantities, or not like names of like companies and stuff. The y-axis is also numeric and value. Both should start at 0. Those are some really big things to make sure you keep in mind. If you were to walk through these, it says the width should be identical. I mean, all of that kind of seems to be about the same as what a bar graph has, other than the x-axis are numeric values, counted up values. The y-axis is counted up values as well. Histograms, they touch. Bar graphs, they don't. The widths all stay the same. Those are all things that I deal with. I mean, it's a way of looking at data, and perhaps you might have seen a histogram or two in your life. So, very bottom, and this is where make sure you jot some notes down. Okay? How many bars should a histogram have? Okay? So when you have a histogram, do you think if I had that as a histogram right there, that shows a really good representation of data? Let's pretend I labeled everything. Or would something that looks like this show you your data more accurately?
Yeah.
Okay, so how many bars should we have? And I would say more than 4. And I'd also say less than 10. This is a general rule. There are certainly ways that we can get away from. We don't have to say this is what the rule has to be, but you definitely want to have. You definitely want to keep in mind. I want more than 4 and less than 10. Anything beyond that becomes too much for your eye to focus in on what you're actually dealing with. This is a good way that a lot of school districts, including ours, a lot of times when we look at like ACT scores or SAT scores or AP scores, we kind of start lumping things in like this. Okay? Now, AP scores, I realize, only go up to 5. So it's like, well, how do I do that? Well, they break up the categories on the x-axis. They don't have to be whole numbers. You could go, 0 to 0.5, 0.5 to 1.0, 1.0 to 1.5, so on and so forth, to create more and more bars. But that all kind of conveys into looking at data. On the next page, up at the top, okay? So the nice thing is, I'm not going to have you do histograms by hand. I'm going to have you use Desmos, and then you have to transfer what Desmos has to your paper. So you're doing it in hand on your paper, but you're using Desmos as your tool. And let me finish a few of these things, and then maybe I'll show you on a histogram how to do stuff. In which bar do observations belong? Okay, and this kind of information, excuse me, doesn't necessarily make sense because we haven't covered enough into a histogram to say we know or we don't know. But we're going to cover that in a moment because I'm going to show you. We're going to create a histogram. Histograms have an advantage of being able to display a huge amount of data effectively, okay, because scores get lumped into the bars. And then a histogram. So do me a favor. This sentence here says, as a result, though, histograms, highlight, underline, something where you can find histograms do not maintain the data set. So if I was taking everybody's height in here in inches, I might go from, 40 inches to 48 inches, 48 inches to 56, so on and so forth. So, but if you look at a histogram and you don't have the data itself, you can't figure out what the data would have been. So if you had, let's say, test scores of 75, 76, 77, 78, and they all get lumped into the same category, you see how many scores that fell within there, but you don't know that you had a 75, a 76, a 77, and a 78. And we're going to show how that works in a moment. And then, let's see, looks good. Okay, note about misleading graphs down at the bottom. Okay, so you're going to see misunderstandings. So if somebody presents a histogram that looks like this, ignore what they're saying. That's crud. Okay? Make sure that you have some really good labels that are indicating how often things are taking place. All right. So may I show you all Desmos? And if you have your phone, get it out. Or if you want to do it on a computer, get your computer out or your tablet. So where's my keyboard? It's going to be easier if I put my keyboard up. All right. All right, so this is what Desmos looks like on the computer. It's going to look a little different on your phone. Actually, I went to the wrong one. Bless you. So you want the chain link one. So we have Desmos. Now this is going to incorporate some class participation. Okay? I need your height in inches. If you don't know how to convert your height in inches, you multiply how many feet times 12, and then you add your inches. So if you're 5'6", you go 5 times 12 plus 6. Does that make sense? Okay, give you a moment to real quick jot down what your height would be. Okay, do you feel comfortable with your data? Anyone struggling on multiplying by 12? Okay. All right, so this is how Desmos works. Desmos is a very user-friendly calculator, but you want to make sure that you understand where certain things are going to live. So, do you see that plus sign at the top left side of my screen? Do you see a plus sign on your screen? When you hit that plus sign, what it's going to mean is I'm going to put data in. Okay, so I'm going to hit that plus sign. It's going to give me a drop down, and I want to do a table. And let me just pause there for a moment. Okay, so right now it's going to give me x sub 1 and y sub 1. And what's nice about Desmos is you can actually plug multiple tables in, and it was just going to change the table numbers. So this one's x sub 1, y sub 1. If I did another table, it'd be x sub 2, y sub 2. The third table, x sub 3, y sub 3, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? So as you progress down this list, you can get more and more lists. But all we want to do is we're under our x1. Does everyone have x1 as one of your subtitles? I need to put your height in inches. So coming around the room, height in inches. 73. Okay. Go ahead. 67. Go ahead. 73. 66. 61. 71.
Should I be putting all these in?
Yeah, you can mimic that. 63. So see if you can plug that in as we're going down. I have the date up on the board. Go ahead. 64. Go ahead. 65. Go ahead. 67. Go ahead. 69. Go ahead. 73. Go ahead. 71. Anthony? 71. 68. Oh, sorry, missed you. 68. Go ahead. Front.
69.
69.
77.
77.
That's taller than 74.
74.
That's also taller than 74.
74. 72. 72. Go ahead. 71. Go ahead. 74. Go ahead. 68. 73. Go ahead. 64. Go ahead. 66. 64. All right. So, do you feel comfortable that this is the entire class's height in inches?
I think it might be.
Does that seem okay?
Yeah.
Now, here's the key. Here's the key. I don't need to worry about putting a y value in because I'm just putting a singleton variable in. So when Desmos is going to draw us this graph, we then have to figure out how many bars do we want to have. So it's going to ask you how many bars you want. So this is not showing up on the graph right now because the graph is waiting for a second piece of data to put in, which is basically the y value. We don't want the y value. We're just going to look at the heights. Okay? So once you are done with the heights of everybody in the class, you come to the next bar down. And a couple of places that you can find this information. So you can either type in the word histogram, which we all know I can't spell, so I need help. So I'm going to go to the keyboard. I'm going to go to functions, and then that pops up, and I want to find the histogram. So the visualization right here is for histogram. Okay. Now you can type in histogram as long as you type it correctly. It goes from being italicized to upright. That means it becomes an operator. But if you're like me and you have to click stuff, you can say histogram. You're like, sure, if I hit histogram, that shows up. I know. What did we label? What our values were? Is it X1, Y1, or is it something? It's X1. So we're going to go histogram, and you're just going to type X1, and then it still doesn't show up. So let's start it with the bar width being 1. Okay?
Where was it? X subscript 1?
Yeah, you just have to hit X and then 1. You don't have to worry about doing a subscript.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right, so if you hit this little plus button down here for the histogram, right there is our histogram where our bars are only 1 apart. Now notice, the bars that adjacent to each other mean something. We might have some gaps in here because we had some gaps in some heights. So here, this is from 60 to like 60, 61, 61 and a half roughly. And there looks to be that there was one person that fell in that category. There's one person that falls in this group. So you have to kind of see how it's counting in the X direction. There looks like there's 3 people in this group. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2. There's 4 here. There's 2. There's 4. There's 3. There's 1. Okay? Yeah.
So like on a table like this, with the top of the X.
Yeah, they're all X.
Oh, they're all X?
They're all X, yeah. All right, so does this appear to be a good histogram? How many bars did I say we wanted? Between 5 and 10, right? More than 4, up to and less than 10. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Did that fall into our category? No, so let's change let's change our width. So if you come back down here and you click by width, see how it moved it up? See how it moves it up? So right now this is saying making a histogram of x1, our width is going to be only 1. If I go and I change that to maybe 2, that might be a nice histogram for us. I mean, let's take a look. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Does that fall into a category that's good for histograms?
I like that.
It is. Okay? So this basically means between 61 and 63, there appears to be one person. Between 63 and 65, there appears to be 4, so on and so forth as you count up. This goes, there's 3 in this region, 4 here, 2 here, 6 here, and 7 here. Now, is that good enough? And how did we count our histogram? Did we count somebody at 63 to go onto the column to the left or on the column to the right? It really doesn't matter when you're looking at a histogram. Okay? Now, on the histogram, we have it centered, but if we click left, that might change it a little bit. Okay? If you go left, that means that your data that fell between 60 and 62, someone exactly at 62 fell into the 60 to 62 range. Someone at 64 fell into the thing to the left. If you hit it at center, it kind of changes it. Which histogram is correct? Both. Okay, they're both correct. So if you wrote this down and your friend was playing around on their phone, got to this, and they wrote this down, both answers are correct. They show the same results of the data, even though the graphs look somewhat different. Now, this is histogram with 2. You can play around and say, well, is 3 enough? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 bars right there. Well, that satisfies that. So we can go between 3. What if we go to 4? Go to 4. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. So which one's correct? It becomes your choice. Because all of the graphs I just showed you are indeed showing a histogram correctly. So let's just show for laughs and giggles. Oops, histogram. Oops. So the power of Desmos, we can do this histogram. X1, comma 2. So now I have 2 histograms up there showing the exact same data. One has the widths being 1, that's behind. One has the widths being 2. And you could actually start doing a little bit of a comparison if you can see through the colors. So histogram X1, if we did it as 3. And I changed this to bolder. Okay. So you don't want all the histograms up there, but it gives you kind of a representation of which one seems more appealing. If you want to say, well, I don't know, I don't think 1 should work. So if you just click this, that gets rid of 1. If you just click this, that gets rid of 2. Okay. It's like, well, that looks good. Maybe it should be that one. Maybe it's that one. Yeah, you kind of played as the author of the problem, you, the author, you get to play around which one works for you. Okay, now this is why a histogram loses the data. So we're focusing on the one where they're spread out 3 apart. Okay, why? We have our data here, so we can go back and look at our data. But let's say this data was missing, we couldn't see it, and we're looking at it. Well, you'd have to look at this saying, well, it appears I have one person that falls into this range. Well, how tall is that person? Well, they fall probably around 57 up to 61.5 inches tall. Well, what's the exact data? If you don't have the data there, the histogram takes away your knowledge of the data. It just tells you how many pieces of data count within that region of how far the bars are apart from each other. Does that make sense how I stated that? Because it's made sense in my head, but sometimes when it makes it to my mouth, it doesn't make sense. Okay? Yeah.
Well, so let's say we're doing any of them. I have an example to show you. So let's say you plug it in, right?
Uh-huh.
Would you want it to be closer to each other?
They don't have to be.
Like, that?
So every single one of these numbers should be plugged in for the X.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep.
So then technically it's one, right?
Yeah. So why yours would be wrong is you only have 3 bars. You want more than 4. So 5 up to 10.
Okay, on this one, it's less than 5.
I said less than 5. Okay, I didn't read the directions.
I got 4 on mine.
So then we could just do 4, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify.
Cool. All right. So this takes us to our next situation for you. So this was 1-3, right?
1-3.
So take a look at page 97, 98. That'll be what you can work on for the rest of the period. And if you don't get it done, work on it tomorrow or before class tomorrow. Something like that.